Queen Vesara pushed through the massive doors of her palace, her silver scales scraping slightly against the polished marble. Every muscle in her body ached. 3 days. 3 entire days of sitting in that council chamber, listening to representatives from 12 different species argue about who had rights to mine asteroids in the outer rim. Her tail dragged behind her, something it never did unless she was truly exhausted. The twin moons hung high above the open courtyard she crossed, casting everything in that strange purple-blue glow she usually found beautiful. Tonight she barely noticed. All she could think about was her throne, the way it perfectly curved to support her spine, and maybe a glass of fermented starfruit wine before sleep claimed her. She took the western corridor, the fastest route to her private chambers. The silence felt wrong immediately. Usually, guards stood at attention every 20 paces. Protocol demanded it. But the corridor stretched empty before her. Then she saw the first one. Guard Captain Moreth, slumped against a decorative pillar, his ceremonial spear fallen across his lap. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. Sleep. No, not asleep. Unconscious. Her claws clicked against the floor as she quickened her pace. 2 more guards lay sprawled near the fountain. A 4th sat propped against the wall, head lolled to one side. All breathing. All alive. But all very much not doing their jobs. Vesara's heart hammered. Was this an attack? Poison? Some new weapon she'd never encountered? Her hand moved instinctively to her neck, where a small emergency beacon hung on a chain. One press would summon every soldier in the palace. Her finger hovered over it. That's when she heard the sound. A sharp crackling like lightning trapped in a bottle, coming from her throne room. The doors stood wide open, light flickering from within. She smelled ozone and something else. Burning metal. She approached slowly, staying close to the wall. Through the doorway she could see her throne room transformed into something she barely recognized. The quantum drive core, normally sealed behind protective panels and maintained only during scheduled ceremonies, sat exposed in the center of the room. Its crystalline surface pulsed with angry red light instead of the calm blue it should have been. Cables and wires lay scattered across the floor like electronic intestines. Sparks showered down from somewhere above the core. And there, kneeling beside her civilization's most sacred piece of technology, was a human. He wore coveralls that might have been blue once but were now more gray and brown from grease and dirt. Some kind of protective mask covered his face, and he held a welding torch in one hand. He was humming. Actually humming some tuneless melody while he worked on technology that predated his entire species by thousands of years. Ryan Blake, she would later learn his name was, seemed completely absorbed in whatever he was doing. He had duct tape, actual primitive Earth duct tape, wrapped around several of the power conduits. A toolbox sat open beside him, filled with equipment that looked like it belonged in a museum of ancient human history, not anywhere near quantum technology. Vesara felt her body respond before her mind caught up. Her claws extended with soft clicking sounds, sliding from their sheaths in her fingertips. Heat built in her chest, traveling up her throat. Fire. The ancestral weapon of her people. This human had invaded her palace, disabled her guards, and was now desecrating the most important machine in her empire. She opened her mouth, ready to incinerate him where he knelt. Then her eyes caught the diagnostic display floating above the drive core. She'd seen that display her entire life, always showing calm green readouts and steady numbers. Now it blazed angry red. Error messages scrolled faster than she could read them. Containment field degradation. Quantum matrix instability. Core breach imminent. And there, in the largest font she'd ever seen on that display, a countdown timer ticked away. 71 hours, 43 minutes, 18 seconds until catastrophic failure. Her fire died in her throat. Catastrophic failure of a quantum drive meant explosion. Not a small explosion. Not contained. It would vaporize the palace, the district surrounding it, possibly half the capital city. Millions of her people lived within the blast radius. You. Her voice came out as a hiss, echoing off the crystal-embedded walls. Every word dripped with venom and confusion and fear she refused to acknowledge. Explain yourself before I reduce you to ash. The human turned around casually, like she just asked him about the weather. He pushed up his welding mask, revealing a face covered in soot and grease smudges. He couldn't have been more than 35 Earth years old. And he was grinning. Actually grinning at her like this was all perfectly normal. Oh, hey boss, he said in that relaxed way humans talked. Sorry about your guards. Just put some mild sedatives in their wine during the shift change. They'll wake up with nasty headaches in a few hours but nothing permanent. Figured it was easier than trying to explain quantum mechanics to guys whose job is standing still and looking intimidating. Vesare stared at him. Her mouth hung slightly open. Of all the responses she'd expected, that wasn't one of them. You dare? Vesare started, her voice rising with every ounce of royal authority she possessed. Your ship's gonna explode. Ryan cut her off completely, not even having the decency to look apologetic about it. He pointed at the diagnostic screen with his welding torch, leaving small scorch marks in the air. See those microfractures in the quantum containment field? Your fancy royal engineers missed them. You've got maybe 3 days before this thing turns your palace into a crater. The queen felt her eyes shift color, blazing from silver to gold. It happened when her anger reached dangerous levels, something she usually kept under tight control during diplomatic meetings. But this human, this grease-covered ape from a species that had only discovered faster-than-light travel 200 years ago, was lecturing her about technology his ancestors couldn't even have dreamed of. Impossible, she snapped, her tail whipping back and forth fast enough to crack against the marble floor. My engineers are the finest in the Empire. They've maintained this drive for centuries. Their families have served the crown for generations. They know every molecule of this machine. Yeah, that's the problem, Ryan said, wiping his hands on his already filthy coveralls. He grabbed a datapad from his toolbox, one of those cheap human models that looked like a child's toy compared to Drackery technology. He shoved it toward her without any of the ceremonial bowing or careful approach protocol demanded. They maintain it. They don't actually understand it anymore. Look right here, here, and here. He pointed at readouts on the screen, his finger leaving smudges. Stress fractures in the crystalline matrix. Your people treat this thing like a holy relic. They bow to it, they pray over it, they follow maintenance schedules written 3,000 years ago. Meh. I'm treating it like what it actually is. A machine that's falling apart because nobody's been willing to really look at it for centuries. Vesare snatched the datapad from his hands, ready to prove him wrong. She'd studied quantum mechanics at the Royal Academy. She understood the theory better than most. But as her eyes scanned the data, her certainty crumbled. The fractures were there. Microscopic, barely detectable, but spreading like cracks in ice. The data was irrefutable. Worse, it was timestamped. He'd been monitoring this for 3 weeks. How did you detect this? She demanded, her voice quieter now but no less intense. Our sensors are calibrated daily. Our engineers run diagnostics every shift. Ryan scratched his jaw, leaving another grease smudge. I stuck my head in there and listened. Old mechanic trick my dad taught me when I was 8. Bad bearings make a specific sound, doesn't matter if it's a car engine or a quantum drive. There's this little tick-tick-tick when metal's stressed wrong. Your people were too busy praying to their instruments to actually check the hardware. He walked over to the drive core, patting it like it was a sick dog. Your engineers, they're reading numbers on screens. They're checking boxes on maintenance lists older than my entire planet's industrial age. But nobody's actually listening to the machine anymore. Nobody's feeling the vibrations or checking if the temperature's a half degree off. That's the difference between maintaining something and understanding it. Vesare felt something twist in her chest. She should kill him. She should absolutely kill him. Every instinct screamed that this human had invaded her home, drugged her guards, and was now touching sacred technology with his primitive tools and ignorant hands. But that data didn't lie. And if he was right, if this drive really was about to fail, then millions of her people would die. You claim you can repair what my royal engineers cannot? She asked, her voice carrying the weight of challenge. Ryan shrugged, that infuriatingly casual human gesture. Ma'am, with respect, your engineers worship the machine. They follow the old ways because that's what was written down. Meh. I'm just trying to keep it from killing everyone. Different skill sets. Prove your competence, Vesare commanded, her tail going still as her mind shifted into testing mode. Tell me the resonance frequency of a Mark 7 quantum stabilizer. She watched his face, waiting for the panic, the desperate lie, the proof that he was just a lucky fool who'd stumbled onto something. No idea, Ryan admitted immediately, not even trying to fake it. Never heard of a Mark 7 anything. But I can tell you that thing over there, he pointed at the stabilizer in question, is oscillating at 2.3% above optimal because I watched it for 20 minutes with a frequency analyzer. Doesn't matter what the books say it's supposed to be if I can see what it's actually doing right now. The queen blinked. Her tail twitched. That answer was not wrong. It was actually more practical than the theoretical answer she'd expected. He just told her the truth of the situation rather than reciting memorized specifications. Her mind raced through options. Send him away and let her engineers handle it? They'd already missed the problem. Call the council? They were 3 days away and she had 71 hours. Try to fix it herself? She hadn't actually touched a drive core since her academy days, and even then it had been supervised demonstrations. Continue your work, she finally commanded, each word costing her pride. But my guards will watch your every move. If you're deceiving me, if this is some elaborate sabotage, you'll roast me. Yeah, I got it, Ryan interrupted again, pulling his welding mask back down. His voice came out muffled now. Might want to evacuate the West Wing just in case I screw up. This next part's gonna involve bypassing some safety systems, and if I'm wrong about the pressure ratios, things could get exciting. Exciting? Vesare repeated flatly. Explosive, technically. But I'm trying to stay positive. He fired up his torch again, that awful humming starting up once more. Vesare stood there, watching a human fix her empire's most advanced technology with duct tape and optimism. Her ancestors would have been horrified. But her people would be alive. Royal Engineer Tolmar swept through the throne room doors just as the first rays of dawn painted the crystal walls gold. His ceremonial robes, deep purple with silver threading that marked his status as master of ancient technologies, billowed dramatically behind him. He'd received an emergency summons in the middle of the night, something about unauthorized access to the quantum drive. He'd assumed it was a malfunction, maybe a minor calibration issue. What he saw stopped him dead in his tracks. His quantum drive, the sacred machine passed down through 40 generations of royal engineers, had been violated. Human tools lay scattered across the holy floor. Duct tape, that primitive adhesive earth mechanics used on everything, wrapped around delicate power conduits like bandages on a wounded soldier. Wires had been rerouted in ways that directly contradicted every maintenance protocol written in the last 3 millennia. And there, kneeling before the drive core with absolutely no protective robes or ceremonial preparation, was a human covered in grease. Sacrilege. The word tore from Tolmar's throat like a physical thing. Ryan didn't even bother looking up from the panel he was rewiring. Morning to you too, buddy, he said casually, using a screwdriver that looked like it had been made sometime during Earth's Industrial Revolution. Tolmar's eyes bulged. His crest, normally a dignified blue-green, flushed deep purple with rage. This human has desecrated the holy drive with tape. He spun toward Queen Vesare, who sat on her throne looking far too calm for the situation. Your Majesty, this cannot stand. The ancients designed this system with precise specifications. Every component has meaning, has purpose, has sacred geometry that... The ancients designed this system 4,000 years ago, Ryan interrupted, still not looking up. He twisted 2 wires together and wrapped them with electrical tape. And they expected regular innovations. You guys just stopped. Froze everything in place like it was perfect and could never be improved. Tolmar felt his chest tighten. His breathing came faster. This was worse than desecration. This was heresy. You dare speak of the ancients? You, whose species was still hunting animals with pointed sticks when my people were bending space itself. Yeah, and now we're both here and your space-bending machine is about to explode, Ryan said, finally standing up and facing the engineer. So maybe we could focus on that instead of whose ancestors were cooler? I challenge this ape to technical combat, Tolmar declared, his voice echoing off the walls. He spread his arms wide, addressing the Queen directly. Before your Majesty, before the throne itself, we shall see who truly understands Drakkari engineering. Let this human prove his knowledge against mine, and when he fails, let him face judgment for his crimes. Queen Vesare leaned back in her throne, her tail curling around its base. A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. Proceed, she said simply. For the next 2 hours, the throne room became an arena of knowledge. Tolmar started with theory, throwing equations at Ryan like weapons. Calculate the harmonic resonance of a crystalline quantum matrix under gravitational stress. Ryan pulled out a napkin from his pocket, drew some sketches that looked more like doodles than mathematics, scribbled numbers around the edges and came up with an answer. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't formatted properly. But when Tolmar ran it through his datapad, the number was right. Lucky guess, Tolmar muttered, moving on. He posed problems about energy distribution, about quantum entanglement, about containment field harmonics. Every time, Ryan solved them with methods that made Tolmar's eye twitch. Trial and error. Rough estimates. Close enough mathematics that somehow worked. When asked to cite his sources, Ryan would say things like, "That time I fixed a similar problem on a freighter using a wrench and prayer," or, "This reminds me of a diesel engine I worked on once." The other engineers who'd gathered to watch murmured among themselves. Some looked scandalized. Others looked curious. Finally, Tolmar posed what he considered the ultimate challenge. "Rebalance the quantum field without shutting down power," he declared, his voice dripping with smugness. "This is the test we give master engineers after 20 years of study. Solve this, and I will concede you have some small measure of skill." He pulled up the field display showing the delicate balance of quantum energies. "You have the floor, human. Show us your solution." "Mathematically impossible," Tolmar added, unable to help himself. "The equations prove it cannot be done without a full shutdown and restart sequence. Perhaps you'd like to consult your napkins again?" Ryan walked around the drive core slowly, his boots echoing on the marble. He placed his hand on the housing at several points, closed his eyes, seemed to be feeling for something. Then he reached into his toolbox and pulled out a hammer. An actual, physical hammer that looked like it had been forged in someone's garage. "What are you doing?" Tolmar demanded. Ryan didn't answer. He struck the housing 3 times, each hit precise and measured. Once near the top. Once on the left side. Once near the base. The metallic clangs rang through the throne room. The quantum field display flickered, wavered, then suddenly stabilized. Perfect balance. The red warnings disappeared. Green readouts filled the screen. The room went absolutely silent. "Percussive maintenance," Ryan explained to the stunned crowd, spinning the hammer in his hand. "Sometimes you just gotta hit it. The vibrations reset the field alignment. Pretty common fix, actually." Queen Vesare leaned forward on her throne, genuinely fascinated now. "How did you know where to strike?" "Felt the vibrations," Ryan said, patting the housing again. "Your quantum field had a wobble like a bent axle on a car. The housing wasn't resonating evenly. I could feel where the stress points were, where the metal was vibrating wrong. Applied force at those points to reset everything. It's not elegant and it won't hold forever, but it works for now." He looked at Tolmar. "Your equations probably said it was impossible because they assumed the housing was perfectly rigid. But nothing's perfectly rigid. Everything flexes a little. Sometimes you gotta work with that instead of against it." Tolmar stood completely frozen, his mouth hanging open. His crest had faded to a pale, sickly green. Everything he'd been taught, everything he'd studied, everything he'd believed about engineering had just been challenged by a human with a hammer. "Continue," Queen Vesare whispered, her eyes locked on Ryan. 18 hours left on the countdown timer, and Ryan knew he was losing. The human epoxy he'd used to seal the microfractures was breaking down. He could see it bubbling and peeling away from the crystalline matrix like sunburned skin. Dracary quantum energies were simply too intense, too alien for Earth materials. The duct-taped conduits he'd rerouted were glowing orange from heat stress, starting to melt in places. Every improvised solution he tried was clashing with physics that didn't quite work the same way they did back home. Red warning lights bathed the throne room in an angry glow. Error messages scrolled faster than before. The countdown seemed to be accelerating. "You've doomed us all," Tolmar hissed from his position near the doorway. He hadn't left since the challenge, watching like a vulture waiting for Ryan to fail. The humans' primitive methods have only made things worse. The drive is degrading faster than before. Ryan wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving another grease smear. His vision blurred at the edges. He'd been awake for 40 hours straight, running on coffee and sheer stubbornness. His hands wouldn't stop shaking no matter how hard he tried to steady them. The screwdriver kept slipping from his grip. He stared at the cascading failure warnings, trying to think through the fog in his brain. The epoxy had been a mistake. The conduit rerouting had been too aggressive. He'd approached this like it was a human machine, but it wasn't. Different rules. Different physics. And now he was out of ideas. "Your Majesty," Tolmar pressed, his voice carrying that smug satisfaction of being proven right. "Execute him now, before he causes more damage. Let my team attempt to restore the original configuration. Perhaps we can salvage." "No," Queen Vesare said sharply. She descended from her throne, her claws clicking on marble as she walked directly toward the quantum drive. "Tolmar, explain the quantum resonance principle to me." The engineer blinked, confused by the sudden shift. "Your Majesty, the sacred texts state that quantum particles must maintain harmonic oscillation within predetermined frequency ranges to achieve stable entanglement, and the crystalline matrix serves as both amplifier and moderator for—" "Stop," Vesare interrupted. "Explain it as if I were human." Tolmar's mouth opened and closed like a fish. The question seemed to physically pain him. Your Majesty, I don't understand what you're asking." The Queen turned to Ryan, who sat slumped against the wall, looking defeated. Explain what you're attempting to do here. Ryan took a shaky breath. I'm trying to. He paused, rubbing his eyes. I'm trying to make the energy flow smooth instead of jagged. Like water through a pipe instead of rocks through a tube. When rocks flow, they jam up, create pressure, break things. Water flows around obstacles, finds the path of least resistance. Your quantum energy is flowing like rocks, and I was trying to make it flow like water. Show me, Vesare said. Ryan looked up at her, confused. Show you what? Show me how you think. Show me your methods. Work with me, not for me. She knelt beside him, her scales scraping against the floor. Tolmar, bring me a maintenance data pad and a welding torch. Your Majesty, you cannot be serious. Now. For the next 6 hours, the throne room became a laboratory. Queen and mechanic worked side by side, their backs bent over the quantum drive like two students cramming for an exam. Vesare provided the ancient theoretical knowledge from her academy days, the deep understanding of how Dracari technology was supposed to work. Ryan provided practical application, the hands-on experience of making broken things run again. When his human epoxy failed, she suggested a Dracari crystalline sealant that could handle the quantum energies. When her precise application methods took too long, he showed her how to rough it in faster. Where Dracari precision failed because they needed flexibility, human adaptability bridged the gaps. Where human materials fell short because they weren't strong enough, Dracari alloys compensated. Try hitting this coupling, Ryan suggested, pointing. That's not in any maintenance protocol, Vesare replied, but she picked up his hammer anyway and struck it. Something clicked into place. Your theories are right, but you're applying them too rigidly, Ryan said, showing her his napkin sketches. See? If you bend this rule just slightly. That violates 3,000 years of engineering doctrine, she countered. Then she paused. But doctrine assumed perfect conditions. Show me how you'd compensate for imperfect ones. Tolmar watched from the doorway, his expression shifting from smugness to horror to something approaching existential crisis. His queen, the leader of his empire, was learning to improvise. She was doing repairs with her own claws, getting grease under her scales, making decisions based on gut feeling instead of consulting sacred texts. 2 hours before the countdown hit 0, something changed. The drive core began humming differently. The error messages slowed, then stopped. The red warnings blinked yellow, then green. The countdown timer froze at 1 hour, 43 minutes, then disappeared entirely. What they'd created wasn't quite Dracari technology anymore. It wasn't human engineering either. It was something new, something hybrid. A self-regulating quantum drive that could sense damage and route energy around it instead of failing completely. It adapted in real time, learning from its own mistakes. The crystalline matrix now had flexible points where human materials allowed for expansion and contraction. The rigid power conduits had bypass systems that could activate automatically. It was crude in some ways, still held together partly with duct tape and improvisation. But it was also elegant, combining the best of both approaches. And strangest of all, it seemed almost alive, responding to conditions instead of blindly following program parameters. The drive hummed with a sound the palace had never heard before. Not the perfect, pure tone of traditional Dracari engineering, but something richer. Something that breathed. Ryan collapsed against the wall, sliding down until he sat on the floor. His eyes were glazed with exhaustion. Did we just invent something? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Queen Vesare stared at her claws, still blackened with machine grease and soot. Her silver scales were smudged. Her ceremonial robe had burn marks from welding sparks. She looked down at the human mechanic who'd invaded her palace, drugged her guards, and challenged everything her civilization knew about technology. Yes, she said quietly, a smile spreading across her face. Yes, we did. The Galactic Council ships appeared in orbit without warning, 3 massive vessels that blotted out the twin moons. Queen Vesare was in the middle of reviewing supply reports when her communications officer burst through the doors, scales pale with panic. The council was here, and they were demanding an immediate audience. Ambassador Kelvan materialized in the throne room an hour later, his crystalline body catching and refracting light in ways that hurt to look at directly. He wasn't alone. 4 other council representatives stood behind him, their various forms representing species from across the galaxy. All of them radiated the same thing: cold disapproval. We received reports of xenotechnology violations, Kelvan announced without any greeting or pleasantries. His voice had that particular quality crystalline beings possessed, like wind chimes made of knives. Specifically, human contamination of protected Dracary heritage systems. This is a Class 3 offense under Galactic Preservation Law. Queen Vesare stood from her throne, drawing herself to full height. The modifications you refer to saved my palace and the lives of 3 million citizens who live within the potential blast radius. Irrelevant, Kelvan said, and somehow made the word sound even colder. Preservation law is absolute. Ancient technologies must remain unchanged, untouched by lesser species. The human responsible must be executed for his crimes, and this abomination he created must be dismantled immediately and returned to original specifications. Ryan, who'd been standing off to the side trying to stay unnoticed, raised his hand like he was back in school. Quick question. Did you guys actually test the new drive before deciding it was an abomination? Kelvan's crystalline form shifted, which Ryan had learned meant annoyance. We do not test heresy, human. The law is clear. You have violated sacred technology. Cool, Ryan said, nodding like this made perfect sense. He looked at Vesare. Your Majesty, mind if we hit the demo button? Show them what heresy looks like. The Queen gestured to her chief technician, who activated the quantum drive's diagnostic display. A hologram materialized in the center of the throne room, large enough for everyone to see clearly. The numbers told a story that was hard to argue with. 40% increased efficiency over the original design. Self-healing capability that detected and routed around damage automatically. Adaptive power distribution that optimized itself based on real-time demands. Fuel consumption down by 30%. Heat generation reduced by half. The throne room fell into complete silence. The council delegates stared at the display like it had personally insulted their mothers. That's impossible, a delegate from the Kree Collective finally whispered, her 6 eyes blinking in sequence. Heritage systems don't improve. They degrade slowly over millennia. That's why we preserve them. Yeah, I get that a lot, Ryan said, stretching his arms over his head until his shoulders popped. He'd finally gotten some sleep and a shower, though his coveralls were already acquiring new grease stains. That's impossible thing. Here's the problem with your whole system though. You guys made technology into religion. Stopped asking, what if we tried this, and started asking, what did the ancients do? That's not progress. That's not even preservation. That's just running a museum where nothing's allowed to change or grow. You dare lecture the council? Kelvan's voice could have frozen fire. I'm just saying, when you treat machines like gods, you forget they're machines. They break. They wear out. They need someone willing to get their hands dirty and actually fix them, not just pray over them and hope for the best. Kelvan turned to Queen Vesare, apparently deciding Ryan wasn't worth responding to directly. Your Majesty, the Council is prepared to be lenient, given the circumstances. We acknowledge the human's actions, while illegal, did prevent a catastrophe. Therefore, we offer him a position as Royal Innovation Consultant. His execution will be postponed indefinitely, provided he works under strict council supervision. This is our final offer. No, Vesare said simply. Every eye in the room turned to her. Kelvan's crystalline form actually fractured slightly from surprise, a hairline crack appearing in his shoulder that he quickly healed. No, he repeated. Ryan Blake is under permanent royal protection, Vesare declared, her voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who'd ruled for 3 centuries. Furthermore, I'm establishing the first human Dracary engineering academy. He will teach my people what they've forgotten, how to think, how to innovate, how to treat technology as something alive and changing rather than dead and sacred. I'll do it, Ryan added, stepping forward to stand beside the Queen. But I've got one condition. Your engineers stop treating machines like they're gods and start treating them like what they are, machines. No more priests. Only mechanics. No more sacred texts that can't be questioned. Only practical knowledge that gets tested and improved. Deal? Kelvan looked like he wanted to argue, but the numbers on that display were hard to dispute. After a long moment, he simply materialized away without another word. The other council delegates followed, leaving Queen Vesare and Ryan alone in the throne room. 3 months later, everything had changed. Queen Vesare stood at the back of a classroom in the new academy building, watching through the observation window. 20 Dracary engineers, all of them older than Ryan's entire species' recorded history, sat at workbenches covered in broken machines and diagnostic tools. Sometimes, Ryan was saying, walking between the benches, the diagnostic is wrong. The computer says one thing, but your ears and your hands are telling you something different. Sometimes you gotta trust your gut, your instincts, and yeah, sometimes you just gotta hit it with a hammer and see what happens. A young Dracari female named Peshare, barely 2 centuries old, stared at the malfunctioning power panel in front of her. She picked up a hammer hesitantly like it might bite her. Then with a deep breath she struck the panel's housing. It sparked once, twice, then hummed to life with steady power readings. Peshare laughed. Not a polite chuckle or a measured response. A real laugh, full of surprise and delight and the pure joy of discovery. Other students gathered around, asking how she knew where to hit it, what it felt like, could they try. Ryan grinned and high-fived her, that peculiar human gesture that his students were starting to adopt. That's what I'm talking about. You didn't ask permission. You didn't check a manual. You just tried something and learned from it. Queen Vesare smiled, her claws tapping softly against the observation window. She'd been wrong about humans. They hadn't given her species new technology. They'd given them something far more valuable. Permission to fail, to experiment, to treat the universe as something to explore rather than preserve. Humanity's gift wasn't their technology or their tools or their methods. It was their absolute refusal to accept impossible. And perhaps, she thought, watching her people learn to think like mechanics instead of priests, that was the most advanced technology in the entire galaxy.